a, a, a link. I was going to say a brotherly link. I don't want to use sexist language here, but there is a real family link between the two churches, the Korean Church and the Presbyterian Church USA. So you went, and there was a service of reconciliation. So tell me about that.
Well, we arrived at the Peace Park. Now, this was the delegation from the U.S. There were quite a few representatives from the Presbyterian Church of Korea and also from the Presbyterian Church of the Republic of Korea, two Korean denominations that we had connections with. And we first went through the museum and then went out to the bridge, the tunnels themselves, and had a tour. When we got back from the tunnels, then our leaders made a presentation of a large bouquet at the memorial that is built there for the problem, the massacre. Yeah. And we had arranged to have a tree planted there. It was interesting. I was photographing the planting of the tree, and there's a little yellow butterfly there. And all the other photographers started chasing after this butterfly. One of the women who was one of the survivors, family, told another woman in our group, she said, you know, this butterfly, this is the father of the current director who's deceased, back here, and he's so happy that there's this reconciliation going on. Yeah.
This man is Chung Eun-young. Yeah. When that incident happened, he started writing the United States government, asking them to recognize, apologize, and compensate. Yeah. But it was denied and rejected by the Army, U.S. Army Department, and finally, President Clinton came out and saying regrettable, and not recognizing the fact that, you know, the incident, but just the word regrettable. So he was a policeman at the time, but he became a lawyer later, and he started requesting the U.S. government to do that. But our delegation, we cannot say on behalf of the U.S. government, but on behalf of the people of the United States, we recognize and we apologize and we confess our sins. Yeah. Yeah. This was the main theme of our memorial service. Yeah.
So you weren't acting on behalf of the United States government to apologize for the atrocity, but
not acting on U.S. government,
but just as individuals and part of the church.
Yes, as church people, and from your own hearts, you felt, and the church felt the need to go and acknowledge and confess, and then the act of reconciliation was the prayers at the service, and then the planting of a tree.
Yeah, the staff at the Peace Park had invited about 40 family members. There were still a few survivors that are still alive to this service of reconciliation. And so after lunch, there was a service. J. Herbert Nelson, the stated clerk, was the preacher. And the most moving part of that was that at the end of the service, that they instructed each of us from the United States and from our partner churches to go and come to pick out one of the people from the families and survivors. And then we went forward and picked up a piece of cloth that had been cut from they called it the River of Tears, and placed the cloth around our partner's neck,
Yeah.
and ask for forgiveness and offer forgiveness and seeking reconciliation. That was a very moving part of the
Yes.
service.
Ed, your family, you still have family members in South Korea and in North Korea?
Yes. Yes.
So can you express what this means to you emotionally to see? I mean, it's certainly not a sense of closure, but it is a step.
Well, it means the tragedy happened, and we try to recognize the tragedy, and we try to have a reconciliation. Yeah.
Our guests today, I should have said this some time ago, are Earl Arnold and Ed Kang, both retired Presbyterian ministers who made a trip to Korea to acknowledge the, well, not just I keep calling it an incident. I don't want to say atrocity, massacre, but it was an episode of the Korean history at Nogan-ri, which is kind of an interesting no-gun-ri. Ri means village, is that right?
Yes.
And no gun doesn't mean no gun as it would in English, but it's kind of an interesting play on words, I suppose.
Now, I think it's significant. It was mentioned in the service that it was not only the Korean civilians who were the victims of this incident. They call it an incident
They do
in
call
their
it,
official
yeah.
material. But a lot of the soldiers that were there came home afterwards injured.
because they had-
Emotionally,
yes.
because they were not prepared. First of all, they were really not ready to be involved in battle. These were soldiers who were on occupation duty in Japan.
Yeah.
But they were certainly never prepared to be killing civilians.
Yeah.
And the fact that they had to shoot these people who they knew were mostly women and children really scarred them.
Yeah.
And in the book, Charles Hanley had interviewed quite a number of them who spoke still of the wounds that they carried from the role that they had been forced to play. They were.
Yeah.
This wasn't something that they chose.
Yeah.
They were victims of the system that required them to be involved in this this horrible incident.
Well, that's an important part of this whole story that we overlooked until this point. Thank you for bringing that up. There are other things we could talk about too in terms of the Korean history, the border peace school at the DMZ, the comfort women. In our personal conversations, we've talked about the issues around that too. But we don't have time to cover that in depth, and so I will just say that to have a border peace school there, especially with all that's going on between the United States now and North Korea, this idea of a peace school, is this for children? Is this for adults?
Now
Very quickly.
This is for adults. They're really teaching a curriculum on peace studies. And I'll tell you, because we were there, the visual imagery of war is very obvious because there are dugouts, tank traps. There's a bus stopped on the way in. This is outside the DMZ. They said, don't get off the road because that's mined on both sides.
Yes.
So the whole idea of war and the terror of war is very vivid there.
Yeah.
So anyone who went to that peace school to study would know very clearly what they were studying for.
Well, it was fascinating. Several years ago that I heard the name of Border Peace School, and I was really happy to see what they were doing there. You know?
Yeah.
And there were quite a number of people from foreign countries,
Yeah.
and they're studying there
They were
for
just
2-3 years. Yeah.
Thank you both for being here. Ed Kang is a retired Presbyterian minister, Earl Arnold, a retired Presbyterian minister. We've been talking about the incident at No Gun Ri. I'm Jeff Kellam, thanking you for joining us for this edition of Encounter, and hoping that you will be with us again next week. And reminding you that it's produced by the Broome County Council of Churches in association with WBNG and WNBF Radio. So in the coming week, I hope you'll be gentle with people and with yourself.